concerns about further spread of the disease. We have working vaccines, and they've saved thousands of lives already, but treating patients who contract COVID-19 is also a crucial aspect in the battle against this disease. During today's EPP main stage event, we're looking into COVID-19 therapeutics and whether they're a game changer for Europe's recovery. Good afternoon to everyone watching our online event. Welcome. We're coming to you live from the European Parliament here in Brussels. My name's Jack Parrock, and I will be your host throughout the event today. And I'm delighted to be joined here in the studio by Angelika Niebler, who is the co-chair of the German delegation in the EPP group, and by Evangelos Meimarakis, who is the vice chair of the EPP group responsible for relations with national parliaments. We're delighted to have you here in the studio with us. For everybody watching, please join our discussion via the YouTube chat, or by putting in Facebook comments, or by using the hashtag EPP4Health on Twitter. We will have our eye across all of those social media channels throughout the whole of this event over the next couple of hours. So here is how the event is going to work. We're going to have some introductory statements from our MEPs and a keynote speech from the European Commissioner for Health, Stella Kyriakides. And then we will have a panel discussion on scaling up the availability of COVID-19 therapeutics with the head of the European Medicines Agency, the global president of Pfizer, and the CEO of Union Therapeutics, and with the European Parliament's chair on industry research and the chair of the Industry Research and Energy Committee. Following that, we'll dive into a discussion on ways to increase diagnosis efficiency for COVID-19. And joining us for that will be the Vice President of the Standing Committee of European Doctors, the President of the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine, and the President of the European Patients Forum. And then we'll have some closing statements from some MEPs here in the European Parliament as well. So now, first we're going to hear from Angelika Niebler. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that this is an issue that you are keen to talk about, this idea of treating COVID patients and focusing on therapeutics.
Yeah. Thank you, Jack. I'm really delighted to be here and also to join this very interesting event. And actually, you're perfectly right. Well, I think we should not only talk about vaccination. Of course, we all know pandemic is not over for a long time. So actually, let's do everything so that people get vaccinated. That is really key, I think. But we also have to look in advance, and the long-term perspective is important. And for that, I think therapeutics are key, actually. And that's why I'm so happy that the EPP group actually took up this issue. So if you ask me, for us in the EPP, I think three things are really important for us. So first of all, we wanted to encourage the Commission to come forward with a plan. We think, we have to have a plan strategically how to move on, and in order to improve diagnosis, improve therapeutics. And we all were very happy. Also, my dear friend Evangelos, we worked together very closely in that field, that, the therapeutic strategy from the European Commission was already adopted last year in May. So that was a good start. Then, we said in Parliament that we need a lot of money, in particular for research. So we do not know enough as regards the virus, as regards the variants. Now everyone is talking about Omicron. So, but where did it come? What other mutations are going to be there? So I think diagnosis, we have to invest a lot of money as regards diagnosis in order to improve. And also, what do we do in order to help people who got COVID-19. You know, we have long COVID. You know, we have people really suffering from COVID. So finding a drug, finding a therapeutics which can help our citizens to better cope with also the consequences out of COVID. I think that's something we wanted to also put an eye on. So money is needed for clinical studies, money is needed for mapping things, money is needed for a lot of things, and that's what we've done in the European Parliament, so to arrange for money being ready for that. And the third thing, which I think is also very important, that is, of course, speeding up the processes. And I'm really happy that also today, during our conference, is also the executive president of EMA, Mrs. Cook, joining us today, who will let us know, you know, how the processes are going in order to speed up when we have when a drug is developed. It's important, you know, having a proper assessment, of course, that's crucial, but also where the bureaucratic assessment can be done more rapidly. I think that also helps also to moving on, because as we see now with Omicron, you know, this variant is spreading around so quickly, so we also have to speed up. So summarizing, I think what's really important for us, we have to, well, be prepared for the worst, but hope for the best. So that's what I hope. And again, I think having a look and a focus also on therapeutics is of utmost importance, and that's what EPP Group does. And we are really happy that Commissioner Stella Kyriakides is doing an excellent job in that. And I'm looking forward to listening to her right now, what she's going to tell us.
Thank you so much for your opening comments, Angelika Niebler. So now we've got a great array of speakers, but we're going to take a quick look about exactly what therapeutics are all about.
Hi, I'm Marie Walsh and I'm an MEP from Ireland, and in 2020 I was diagnosed with COVID-19 and then I recovered and I thought I was out of the woods. And it's only in the months after that I realised I had things like muscle fatigue, joint pain and brain fog. Thankfully, many survivors get back to normal within 2 weeks of getting sick. But for some COVID-19 survivors like me, symptoms can persist for months. These survivors are sometimes dubbed long haulers, and the disease process is termed long COVID, or post-acute COVID-19 syndrome. Numerous studies over the past few months have shown that about 1 in 3 people with COVID-19 will have symptoms that last longer than the typical 2 weeks. These symptoms affect not only people who were very sick and hospitalized with COVID-19, but also those with milder cases. So what is it that causes long COVID?
So the symptoms of long COVID are varied. The primary ones are fatigue that limits your day-to-day activities rather than just feeling tired in the evenings. It also is common to see reduced ability to exercise, reduced exercise tolerance and increased breathlessness. And we see a wide range of neurological features such as impaired memory, poor concentration and other things that come under the term brain fog. It was initially predicted that those who had the most severe disease, such as admitted to the intensive care unit, would be most likely to have persistent ill health afterwards. However, what we have found is that even patients who had a relatively mild initial infection who didn't need to come to hospital actually developed long COVID as well. Given the burden of long COVID across Europe, I think it's important that all patients who are diagnosed with COVID-19 have equitable access to services.
But what about mental health aspect? For me, I struggled with the day-to-day concentration, being on my screen, not getting outdoors enough, not eating enough, and that all took a toll on my own mental health. And equally, when you're under a pressured job and you're trying to perform, it becomes a bit of a vicious cycle.
Governments, I think that they're realizing that something needs to be done in terms of mental health. I think that there are actions on mental health in some states and sometimes more at the local level, that they are there, but they're still not really well coordinated. And I think that that's where there needs to be probably more action at the European level.
Now that we've heard from the experts, let's get the perspective of people who have had the experiences living with long COVID.
We just had a bad flu for a week, really bad flu, and we had high fever. And then after 2 days, then it really became in a different phase. I had a chest pain, heart beating, bam, bam, bam here. It was really scary. I had nausea, I was dizzy. I could not compare it with anything else.
It's been hugely beneficial to hear from some of the experts and also the stories of patients from around Europe suffering from long COVID. Dr. Townsend said we must be aware of the growing issues lingering during the pandemic. As our representative of Mental Health Europe said, we need to ensure mental health is an integral part of recovering from long COVID. So there is much that needs to be done. We need to increase the awareness around the effects, and this needs to be done through pan-European action.
So thank you so much to Maria Walsh for that video explaining her experience of long COVID as well. Now we're going to hear from Stella Kyriakides, who is the EU Commissioner for Health and Food Safety. I believe she is joining us now. Commissioner, thank you so much for being with us at this event. How much of a priority are COVID therapeutics for the EU Commission right now?
Thank you. Good afternoon. I hope that you're able to see me and hear me.
We can hear you.
And
we can see you.
I think you've got both on. Hello, good afternoon, dear friends, honourable members. I can see Evangelos Meimarakis there, our Vice President. Good afternoon. And I heard Angelika Niebler. First of all, I want to just come from a point that MEP Walsh said, how much COVID-19 has really affected our lives since now almost 2 years. And she has highlighted the importance of issues such as mental health, which for a long time have really not been given the importance that possibly they should have. And she highlighted also the importance and the impact of long COVID and those who have gone through COVID but are still feeling the symptoms. We are currently in another harsh wave in the EU with the new variant, and again, there are continuous need for public health measures, and of course this is putting an added pressure on society and citizens. But scientists and innovators, and many of them are in this call, in this meeting today, and I want to thank them on my behalf and on all our behalf for the great work that has been done. They have shown how we can closely collaborate beyond the borders and work in solidarity literally around the clock in order to present what we need to do in terms of vaccines and therapeutics, which can be game changers for this pandemic. Vaccines, exactly 12 months ago, were delivered equitably across all the EU. And this has shown the power of solidarity in the EU, the power of the 27 working together. But we know that there will be always people who have COVID, who need to be hospitalized. So we knew that we also needed to turn our focus on therapeutics. And this year in May, we presented the EU COVID-19 therapeutic strategy, following the same, if I may permit the word, successful coordinated portfolio approach as our vaccine strategy, based on joint procurement and negotiation with and on behalf of the 27 member states. So the aim is to develop and secure the most promising COVID-19 treatments, but also, importantly, to ensure simultaneous and equal access across the EU to highlight the spirit of European solidarity that we have seen with the vaccines. And with this strategy, we aimed to launch 7 rolling reviews in 2021 and authorize up to 5 new therapeutics by the end of the year. I want to share with you that we have already granted marketing authorization for 3 therapeutics, 2 monoclonal antibodies and 1 immunomodulator, and up to 3 new therapies may still be authorized by the end of this year. So I'm very pleased that we are on track to meet these targets. I know from the program that our director of the European Medicines Agency, Emer Cook, will be intervening today, and I want to thank her and her team at the agency for the really remarkable job from the beginning of this pandemic. The European Medicines Agency has rapidly and thoroughly assessed scientific data, and this has accelerated the authorization of the vaccines as well as therapeutics without undermining the standards of efficacy and safety and quality, which is our trademark. which I think is important to also always emphasize, because in an age that of this pandemic and of disinformation and misinformation, basing our decisions on science and on robust science is ultimately the most important thing that we can do to gain citizens' trust and confidence, both in vaccines and also in therapeutics. As announced in the therapeutic strategy, a therapeutics innovation booster is also being set up, and this will support therapeutics at the early stage of research and development. To date, we have invested 119 million from Horizon 2020 to support 45 research and innovation projects on therapeutics and treatment options for COVID-19, including via the European Innovation Council and the Innovative Medicines Initiative. And additionally, under the HERA incubator, we have mobilized another 47 million euro under Horizon Europe for clinical trials and platforms, so that we're able to facilitate the rapid development of the most promising therapeutics to combat this virus and its variants. HERA, which is up and running, is currently monitoring the list of most promising therapeutics against COVID-19. We have already completed 2 joint procurement agreements under the strategy with pharmaceutical companies, and we stand ready to conclude new joint procurements still this year, notably for oral antivirals. And in parallel, preparatory work is going on to help us to set up a network of ever-warm production capacities for vaccines and therapeutics manufacturers. And for this, a call of tender for under HERA will be published for 2022 for an amount of around 160 million. So I want to just say that Omicron, which has really been present, at least we have been made so aware of it only in less than 2 weeks, has reminded us very clearly that this is a global pandemic, and global pandemics require, of course, global solutions, not only for vaccine, but also for safe and effective therapeutics. We have, with global partners, we have set up access to COVID tools, Accelerator Act-A. We provide funding not only to its vaccine pillar COVAX, but also to its therapeutics pillar. And in this, we work under UNICEF's lead in order to prepare lower and middle-income countries for the introduction of new COVID-19 viral therapeutics. And we are working continuously to ensure that once new therapeutics are available, they can be produced as generics. And so far, over 112 countries are covered by this initiative, as we support partners around the world in many other ways. For example, the EU has invested over 1.1 billion euro to strengthen health systems in 13 African countries in this pandemic. So in ending, I just want to say that vaccination continues to offer the best protection against COVID-19. So for those in this call, those listening, I want to just send a message that you need to proceed with your vaccination and your boosters. We need to move forward with this. We need to ensure that as many people are vaccinated and then receive the boosters as possible. We need to close these gaps that we are still seeing and within the European Union. But despite this, people are going to continue to fall sick and need to be treated at hospital and at home. And this is why the EU COVID-19 therapeutic strategy, which models on our vaccine strategy, is really the best example of what we can do together in solidarity, working with responsibility and coordination. And I'm sure with everyone else involved in this call, and I want to thank everyone for the ongoing hard work and the commitment. I'm sure that we'll be able to ensure that therapeutics are produced and delivered to member states and others in need once they are authorized. And this needs to be the way that we will work together to go forward. So thank you once again for this opportunity. And I look forward to hearing some of the interventions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kyriakides, for that keynote speech to launch our event today. Now, turning to you, Evangelos Meimarakis, thank you so much for being with us. I wonder if you can explain a little bit about what's happening in the European Parliament at the moment on this idea of treating COVID patients and not just vaccines.
First of all, thank you for the invitation, and I believe that it's a very interesting issue that we discuss. I will speak in Greek language, it's better for me, and we wanted to hear all the language in our parliament. This is a rule that we have.
Absolutely.
Here. So I will speak in Greek language, and I will tell you, και θα σας πω ότι εγώ περισσότερο παρίσταμαι ως πολιτικός που ζει.
You will be aware that as a politician, I deal with the potential effects on communities and on the world as a whole. The situation is such that new circumstances have emerged due to the epidemic. A new framework has come into being within which we must act in order to ensure that we buffer the economic and social fallout from the pandemic. And I'm glad that the EPP has made it a priority to deal with the consequences of the epidemic, not just dealing with the epidemic itself, but also developing cancer therapies. And I'm very grateful for everybody who's taken part in this in the EP. For example, Ms. Niebler, who's been very active, and also Commissioner Kyriakides, who are actively searching for solutions. In times of a crisis, as I see it, we cannot dither. We must act swiftly in order to have a common political reaction from Europe as a whole. Therefore, the member states will be in a position to make their regional tweaks to the general parameters we hand down, because the various member states are affected to different extents. We are aware that health is not within the purview of the EU. This is a national policy. Therefore, we think we can play a coordinating role, as we have done with inoculations. This means that we have a shared European framework in place for keeping freedom of movement. Because in moving around, we would not want to be transporting the virus. Of course, extra national measures may kick in. For example, obligation to wear a mask, earlier closing times, various different forms of providing education in the various member states. These are important national elements we have certainly taken on board. But this strategy from the Commission, when it comes to dealing with this situation, has been somewhat left by the wayside, whereas great attention has been paid to inoculation. We want to make ever greater headway in a broader sense. So thank you once more for organising this event. And I believe it's important that we pool our expertise on this topic so that we come up with a sound European strategy as to what therapies we can draw on. So we need to home in on research for new therapeutic methods. We politicians ought to make the right funds available for R&D. Likewise, we must see to it that our own therapeutic methods are further honed. The EPP assures you that it will do everything it can to assist you in ensuring that everything runs smoothly. That was already brought up by Ms. von der Leyen and Ms. Kyriakides.
to the Commissioner Kyriakides and also to Angelika Niebler, who launched this event for us. Now, a reminder to everybody that if you're talking about our event, you can use the hashtag EPP4Health anywhere online, and please do. And please also leave your questions in the chat on Facebook, on YouTube, or wherever you're watching. We will try to put as many questions to our coming panelists as possible. Now, moving on to our first panel discussion, we're going to be talking about scaling up the availability of COVID-19 therapeutics. We are delighted to be joined by Christian Busoy, an MEP here on the chair, indeed, of the Committee on Industry, Research and Energy here in the European Parliament. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
We also have Emma Cook, who's the Executive Director of the European Medicines Agency. We have Angela Lukin, who is the Global President of the Hospital Business Unit at Pfizer. And we have Dr. Kim Kjola, who is the CEO of Union Therapeutics. I hope that we're going to be able to talk to all of you. I hope that we'll be connected to everybody online. Obviously, we're doing this event hybrid. And just a reminder to everybody in our audience that you can join our discussion using the YouTube chat, by posting in the Facebook comments, or by using the hashtag EPP4Health on Twitter. Now, each of our panelists are going to give some introductory comments on this issue, and we're going to start with you, Christian Busoy. Thank you so much for being with us in the European Parliament. Tell us, I mean, this is an issue, the need for scaling up therapeutics. What do we need to do?
Thank you so much, Mr. Perrock. It's a privilege to be here today. First of all, we have to acknowledge the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic showed the vulnerabilities of our health systems. But in the same time, we experienced the fact that global supply blockages, shortages of medicines and medical crews, lack of coordination, the misinformation made the health systems more vulnerable in the fight against this pandemic, and also put it at risk patients with other pathologies than COVID-19. It is true that maybe a lot of attention was concentrated on vaccination. Vaccination is extremely important, is the most important solution to end this pandemic and to prevent serious cases, to prevent deaths, to prevent the virus to be spread. But it's not enough, and it is true that we need also to concentrate on therapeutics. And the debate that TPP is organizing is more than welcome. We have all seen very encouraging news in the past couple of weeks about novel oral antivirals being available to patients that are not hospitalized. We welcome such news. The European Medicines Agency, and I'm happy that Director General Cook will be with us, because they made a very good job, an excellent job to assess at time not only vaccines but also antivirals and therapeutics for COVID. And with their assessment, we have the guarantee that these products are appropriate, are safe and effective to treat patients. Such advancements will hopefully help keep patients out of hospitals and potentially save lives. It is fair to say that the standard of care has been continuously evolving from almost 2 years ago, when first patients came to hospitals. But still, hospitals generally need to cope with large number of patients that need treatment options in order to be able to be short and hospitalized, not to become an ICU case, and also to save lives. That's why we need these treatment options, we need these therapeutic options, we need these antivirals, and as many options as we have, it is better, because then we'll avoid the most difficult cases. Now it is good to see if we have enough available antivirals and therapeutic options. Also, it is important to look a little bit to the idea if it would be helpful to have joint procurement agreements at the EU level, like we had for vaccine. And it's a huge success in European Union that we had this type of procurement at the EU level with a very fair and good price and with a good and continuous supply for all EU member states.
Yeah, I think we'll pick up on some of those issues as well, especially when we talk about procurement. As you say, it's really important. So now let's hear from Emma Cook, who's the Executive Director of the European Medicines Agency. Clearly, there's been a huge focus on the vaccines that have been, rolling out. How quickly is the EMA moving now, Emma, to focus on therapeutics?
For the opportunity to be here. It's indeed a pleasure to see some attention really being given to the need for therapeutics. And as you heard from the Commissioner earlier, we've already authorised 3 therapeutics under the Commission's strategy, but we had already authorised one therapeutic, an antiviral, in 2020. So there's a lot of new activity at the moment in the area of therapeutics. It's clear that we need therapeutics in addition to vaccines. I think one of the things we all need to be aware of is that we're understanding a lot more about this disease now than we did at the very early stages, and we thought it was a respiratory disease. But in fact, it's a very complex disease with different manifestations in different patients, which means that we need different sort of treatments. And the type of treatments that we have seen, particularly in the pipeline now, are antivirals and immunomodulators. And these work at different stages of the disease. And I think as we learn more about long COVID, we'll need to look at what would be appropriate therapeutics to tackle the symptoms of long COVID, and that's something where we're looking at the research that's ongoing there. So I am very pleased that we have been able to authorize a number of therapeutics. We have the first antiviral Valkyrie was authorized in July 2020. And then just last month, we approved 2 monoclonal antibody antivirals, Recurinra and Ronapreve. And only this Monday, we finalized the assessment of the first immunomodulator, Roactimra. So there's also a couple of other products that are used, for, immunomodulators that are used in other diseases that have also shown some preliminary efficacy in COVID, and we're looking to finalize these assessments also. The other area that I think it's important to draw attention is the positive news from some of the clinical trials with oral antivirals, because if all of the other products are actually injections. So if you have oral treatments, they obviously are much easier to integrate into patient care. So we're looking in particular at products developed by Merck and by Pfizer. So we're looking at the data packages as the clinical trials complete, and we in this way we hope to make them available to patients as quickly as possible. For the molnupiravir from Merck, we already provided advice 3 weeks ago, which can support emergency use. And for the Pfizer product, this is under rolling review, and we would hope to have to be able to give a scientific recommendation before the end of the year. So I just want to stress that it's not just vaccines, although vaccines, and please do make sure I have the opportunity to pass the message that we need to increase vaccine uptake, we need to increase boosting, but we're also working in parallel at assessing the data for therapeutics. We're talking to some 125 developers who all have products at different stages of development.
Thank you so much for those opening comments, Emma Cook, the Executive Director of the European Medicines Agency. Now we're going to turn to Angela Lukin, who is the Global President of the Hospital Business Unit at Pfizer, obviously a company that has been right in the heart of this pandemic. Thank you so much for joining us. I wonder if you can explain what Pfizer has done. Obviously, the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine has been one of the most used everywhere in the world, but what's happened with the therapeutics that you're putting together, and where are we?
Great. Well, thank you. First, good afternoon, and thank you again for inviting me to join and be part of this esteemed panel. My name is Angelika, and as you mentioned, I head up the Global Pfizer Hospital Business Unit, which impacts the lives of over 200 million patients a year. And let me start by sharing with you just how proud I am of the unprecedented collaboration that Pfizer has had with the EU institutions and with governments over the past 2 years as we strive to help put an end to the COVID-19 pandemic. And since the beginning of the pandemic, we have said that it would take both vaccines as well as preventative measures, as well as treatment options to overcome this pandemic. And as many of you know, in addition to the COVID-19 vaccine Comirnaty, which was developed in collaboration with our partners at BioNTech, Pfizer also independently really developed our oral antiviral Paxlovid, which is nirmatrelvir and ritonavir, for 3 patient populations, which include the treatment of COVID patients who are at high risk. These are patients who have COVID symptoms and at least one risk factor that would put them at high risk of progressing to more severe illness. We're also studying in a patient population of standard risk. And then, of course, the third group, which is post-exposure prophylaxis, meaning patients who live in close contact with someone who's COVID positive. EU was an important contributor in our high-risk trials. We actually enrolled about 21% of our population through Europe in the high-risk trial. And if approved and authorized, this compound, which originated in our Pfizer labs, would be the first oral antiviral of its kind specifically designed for SARS-CoV-2 3CL protease inhibitor. We're also very proud that Paxlovid was selected by the European Commission as part of its portfolio of the 10 most promising COVID-19 treatments in late October. And we are very keen to partner with the EU institutions and national governments so that European patients can benefit from this innovation as quickly as we possibly can, as quickly as it can be authorized. We are in dialogue, of course, with the European Medicines Agency, EMEA, regarding the submission of the rolling conditional marketing authorization and expect to start that submission soon. And in addition, Pfizer is working with national authorities on procedures for emergency authorization for their countries that would follow the issuance of EMA Article 5.3 scientific opinion. And I'm pleased to share the panel with the EMA Director, Amber Cook, today. Over the past months, we've been in active dialogue with the European Commission on potential EU joint procurement path for Paxlovid, should it be authorized and approved. And as a continuation of this, we are now discussing newly established Health Emergency Preparedness and Response Authority, HERA, as well as European governments with the aim to secure broad and equitable access for European patients as soon as possible after Paxlovid is approved. And I really look forward to our discussion today and working together towards our shared common goal. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those opening comments. So now we're going to turn to Dr. Kim Köhler, who's the CEO of Union Therapeutics. I wonder if you can outline what you have sort of in the pipeline right now.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you for the invitation for this very important meeting. So Union Therapeutics is a privately held Danish biotech company located here in the Copenhagen area. And we are working both with an immunomodulator as well as an antiviral called niclosamide. Niclosamide was identified by the Institut Pasteur in Seoul, South Korea back in March 2020 as the, at that point in time, most potent agent against SARS-CoV-2 and was said to be roughly 40 times more potent than remdesivir. Now, niclosamide is an interesting compound in as much as it was originally developed as a tablet for tapeworm infection and as such works perfectly well. The challenge is, though, that it stays in the gut, which is good for tapeworm but not so good for COVID. There you want to have it systemically exposed or exposed into the target organ of SARS-CoV-2. Unfortunately, it's difficult to formulate, but we had actually worked here at Union with niclosamide since 2015 and had 2 high concentrated solutions that we have been able to formulate with a nasal spray as well as a nebulizer, so being able to deliver it directly to the entry of SARS-CoV-2 and the main organs for the infection. Now, the interesting thing with niclosamide is it's really its mode of action. It doesn't target the virus as such, but rather target our cells, so the host cells. And in doing so, it prohibits the virus for releasing its genome and basically taking over our cells' production to make new virus particles and shed them. On the second mode of action, it also increases the cell capability of autophagy, so it helps the cell clear virus that have already entered. So a mode of action that is, you can say, insensitive to the different variants that we have seen arising, and also intuitively have efficacy against other viruses than SARS-CoV-2. So we really see this compound as a good new molecule in also better together with vaccines help go against the new variants of COVID. And we actually have shown that we have completely maintained efficacy against was almost inclined to say all no variants, and then Omicron comes along. So we are currently testing that, but we see no reason why we wouldn't have preserved efficacy there. Now, the other patient population, and thank you to Angela to stipulate the scope of the very impressive Pfizer program. The patient population that we are focusing on right now is the immunocompromised patient, and here we have been selected with our nasal spray for the Protect V study in the UK. And today we have more than 685 patients included into that study. And the goal of that study is to basically protect these patients, these very vulnerable patients, for contracting SARS-CoV-2. Now, in the first here, immunocompromised patients are a very difficult population for us, as they have no immune system. They don't mount a good response upon vaccination. And to sort of underpin that, in the unvaccinated time of COVID, the mortality of this population, the kidney transplant and dialysis patients in the UK, was 21.8%, whereas in the background population we were around 2.4%. Today, in a post-vaccination situation, the mortality in this population is still extremely high. It's 13.5%, whereas in the background population, we actually, fortunately, thanks to the vaccines, down to 0.4%. So certainly a patient population where we need something in addition to the vaccines, and we see niclosamide here as a good opportunity. And to that end, I have to really thank and congratulate Emma Cook for the setup of the EMA system here, with the opportunity for not only the rolling review, but actually early interactions for biotech companies such as ours, where EMA actually also have ongoing dialogue to FDA to make sure that the endpoints that we are using in this important study are more or less aligned between the two most important regulatory agencies of the world. And also for stipulating that this study, when we hopefully have a positive readout, will actually be a registration-ready study with somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 patients. So I think a good example of how EU have really moved to help support innovation. The one thing, though, that I would like to bring to the table today is that, assuming we have a positive readout somewhere between first and second half of next year, obviously there will be a expectation that we will be able to deliver also a lot of nasal sprays. And this is actually where we struggle as a biotech company to find fundings in order to basically scale up our production. And I'm happy to inform that the entire production or supply chain we have is actually a fully European, going from API in Spain, nasal spray delivered from France, nebulizers from Germany, and then assembly of nasal spray and product in Austria. So really advanced purchase agreement early on to secure that we also can deliver in full once we have positive data. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kim Köhler, a true European solution there across the borders. I wanted to turn into you, Christian Boussoy. This pandemic has been going on for a long time. It's part of our lives now. How aware are citizens of the need for therapeutics? I mean, there's so much focus on the vaccine. And what can you do as a politician here in the European Parliament to talk about this?
I think that we need both. Of course, we need vaccination as a form of prevention for spreading the virus and for clearly for having serious illness or having also being in a situation to be in ICU or even to lose the life. This is clearly extremely important, and there are still countries like my country, Romania, where we need to focus a lot on vaccination. But we have to acknowledge the fact that some of our citizens will refuse to vaccinate, and it's not only about hesitancy, it's to refuse due to misinformation, to personal beliefs. We don't go in this discussion now, and they are more fragile, and if they will have the virus, then it is important to have the therapeutic options in order to save them, to save their lives, to save their health. And of course, even for some very few vaccinated people, we need, when they're hospitalized, to have the therapeutic options. I don't think citizens are unaware. You're right, the focus was very much on vaccination, but clearly most of European countries also prepared well and were available in their hospitals, the therapeutic options also. Sometimes when we have the peaks and the hospitals are full, there is some shortage of these therapeutic options. And until now, even that we had some options, starting with remdesivir, then dexamethasone, then the other therapeutics, sometime, of course, they were not enough. But with the good news, with the strong involvement of European Commission, and Commissioner Kyriakides made an excellent job from the beginning in the whole areas, not only on therapeutics. With the efforts of EMA that were acknowledged earlier, and they are extremely effective in doing that, I believe in the coming months, because unfortunately we will have to still to witness these pandemics in the coming weeks and months, the options will be much more available, and of course more citizens will be safe.
Yeah. So turning back to you, Emma Cook, I wonder, I mean, you have been focused, obviously, and under a lot of scrutiny, really, I suppose. There's been a lot of focus on the EMA with vaccines. What are the differences in the process of approving a therapeutic medicine and a vaccine? And how do you sort of balance efficacy and speed? What are the differences in that process of being able to scale up, then, therapeutic medicines?
Yeah, so I mean, I just want to make it clear that we have been looking at both therapeutics and vaccines from the very start, and it has really been about when the clinical trial results came through that we were able to give positive feedback on either vaccines or therapeutics. So. Of course, vaccines are for use in healthy populations, so it's a preventative. They're preventative treatments. So we're looking at very large clinical studies. We want to have efficacy. Initially, we're looking at least 50% efficacy, but actually we've seen a lot better than that. In the therapeutics, we really have to look at what the benefit risks are saying. We may have some very sick we may have some very severely ill patients who may benefit, whereas the less severely won't benefit. So we have to weigh up these benefit risk decisions, and we will have smaller clinical trials. But actually, we're seeing, as we heard from Dr. Culler, we're seeing quite a few large-scale clinical trials on therapeutics as well. I think it's very important that whatever we see, we make sure that it's safe and effective and has a positive benefit risk balance. I have to say, at the early stages of the pandemic, the clinical trials we were seeing were very small, so it was very difficult to draw conclusions that we could definitively say there was a meaningful benefit. And we're beginning to see some very positive results coming in now.
Thank you so much. Turning to you, Angela Lukin, I wonder how quickly can you as a company scale up your therapeutics once they're approved? It took a bit of a while to get going with the vaccines. Are you ready to move?
No, thank you for the question. I mean, Pfizer's invested $1 billion at risk. We knew upfront that we needed to plan for a positive outcome, and so we needed to invest quite early on in terms of being able to manufacture. And so we did that investment for our antiviral with the goal of making the treatments available as quickly as possible. We have the capability and the capacity, as we've just recently announced about a couple of weeks ago, to manufacture up to 80 million treatment courses by the end of 2022. That's up from 50 million that we talked about literally a couple of weeks ago. So of course, this is going to be driven by advanced purchase agreements and the desire and the interest from countries around the world. And we currently are projected to manufacture about 21 million of those packs in the first half of the year, and are currently bringing on additional capacity to further ramp up production. Our global supply chain includes a very important footprint in Europe, where we're leveraging 4 key manufacturing locations across Europe to meet the demand for COVID-19 antiviral therapy. And we're applying our deep heritage in developing oral treatments of producing almost 24 billion pills a year, and the success from developing and scaling up and the learnings that we took from the manufacturing process of what we went through with Comirnaty, which is our agreement and our collaboration with BioNTech to respond to the global pandemic. We're currently bringing on additional capacity, ramping up even further. As with our vaccine, we expect our strong manufacturing capabilities and extensive supplier network to improve output rapidly and over time. And we remain confident in our ability to supply Paxlovid. But again, I would just stress, it's important, if approved and authorized, of course, that our supply to European countries will be dependent upon their demand and volume commitments that we receive. So we are currently discussing with European countries bilaterally, as well as via HERA, with the view to start potential EU joint procurement process. And the EU level discussions kicked off back in the summer. So, again, just a sense of urgency that we receive information as quickly as possibly as to make sure that
We're losing you slightly there, Angela. So we'll leave it. I think you're back. I think the screen is back.
Yes, sorry. I was just concluding with just.
It's okay.
Yeah, with just the importance of making sure that we. That we continue the importance of the collaboration that we're having at a bilateral as well as an EU level to secure the commitments that Europe is going to need for 2022.
Thank you so much. I wonder if we can turn back to you, Dr. Culler. Perhaps you can just explain. I know that your nasal spray is obviously something that is being talked about and is one of the one of the therapeutics that has a sort of focus on it. Can you explain how it would work? How we as people, would we go into a pharmacy and buy it? Would we be prescribed it? How would we take it? I wonder if you can outline that.
Yeah, and thank you for that question, Jake. The population we are going for now is, and the indication is basically prophylactic of immunocompromised patient, and as such, it would be prescribed by the physicians. In this case, it will be within the area of dialysis and transplant, kidney transplant patients. So it would be physicians there that would be prescribing it for this population. If we look a little bit broader, I think it's important to recognize also, and we saw that unfortunately a couple of weeks ago with Colin Powell that died due to COVID-19, that of course it extends beyond that. certainly also to people with leukemia that are also massively immunocompromised and do not mount a good enough response to vaccination. So for these populations, we do need additional treatment or prophylactic treatments, and the nasal spray is one such. I think we are currently the most progressed in this specific population. And importantly, it would be a prescription. Though I do appreciate the question, and of course we also run other studies that are more with early intervention, early treatment, and also potentially extending into, you can say, prophylaxis within the family if you have a member that tests positive. But that's more exploratory studies that we are running also.
Thank you so much. So just a reminder to our audience, you can keep dropping your questions and your comments on the live feed, and we will try and put them to our panelists. Now, I believe we are going to have a question actually from Florin Alexa, who is a member of the Chamber of Deputies from Romania, and I believe he's joining us and is going to put a question to our panelists.
Hello. Good evening from Bucharest. A question for Emer Cook and Angela Lukin. We know that the treatments are mostly addressed to people who did not get vaccinated. Do you, however, have data regarding their efficacy on vaccinated people who still need to be treated? And also, are these treatments efficient for patients with long COVID? Thank you very much.
Let's go first to you, Emer Cook.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. Indeed, it's something that we're being asked by a lot of public and also by many physicians. So just to be clear, all the therapeutics that we're looking at the moment have been studied in non-vaccinated subjects. But part of what we will ask as a follow-up measure, if we do give approval, is to look at their impact in vaccinated patients as well. So this is something that we would typically do as follow-up. And so far, just to come to the question on long COVID, we don't have anything in the pipeline for long COVID. I think one of the challenges is that we're still trying to understand what long COVID is, and in fact it may be a series of different manifestations depending on the individual. So it's likely that we'll be looking for maybe neurological solutions for some people, maybe immunomodulators for others. So it's something that's a little further along the horizon. But I would say that we're really calling for additional research in this area so that new therapeutics that will give hope and promise to patients will be made available as quickly as possible.
So Mr. Alexa also put his question to you, Angela Lukin.
Yes, thank you. So look, I completely agree with Ms. Emer Cook just in terms of long COVID. I think we need to better understand what's causing that in order to figure out the best possible treatment course. In terms of vaccinated patients, for our EPIC high-risk study, we did not include, as she said, we did not include fully vaccinated patients, as vaccination reduces the risk of progression to severe illness and hospitalization and death. However, we do have an ongoing EPIC standard risk study, which is being conducted in participants who are symptomatic with COVID and have standard risk, and allows inclusion criteria for vaccinated high-risk patients into that study.
Thank you so much. Now we have a question that's come in on the chat as well, and this is also for you, Emer Cook. From someone called Thomas. A reminder to everybody that they can drop their questions in on the event anywhere that you're watching. The question is: Dr. Zelenko showed that early treatment with hydroxychloroquine, excuse me, couldn't get that out, and zinc was effective, but apparently the European Medicines Agency has forbidden doctors to use that. They said, will that be changed, Emer Cook?
So Thank you very much, Thomas. And again, a question that we get quite a lot. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we were seeing all sorts of possible miracle cures, possible solutions, and we really had to make sure that the studies we were looking at did show convincing efficacy for patients, because that's our job. Our job is to protect patients. Our job is to make sure that the medicines that we approve are safe, of high quality and effective. And so far we have not seen that in the case of the oh my goodness.
I did it. Actually, it was my fault.
So we won't recommend the use of any product unless we're convinced that the clinical trials have shown safety and efficacy and can be manufactured to high quality for all patients. And once we have that information, we're ready to go.
Thank you very much. A pretty clear answer there. Just turning to you, Dr. Köhler, as well. I wonder if you can explain this from a sort of business perspective as well, because for pharmaceutical companies, there is, financial gain. I wonder if there's a lot of competition here. I wonder if it's seen as a sort of place in the market, a market to build at least.
The way we typically go about it is to look at where are the existing unmet medical need, and that is also why we have homed in on the immunocompromised patients, because this is a population where we still see a significant unmet medical need, and certainly where we believe that niclosamide nasal spray can really make an important difference to quite a number of lives across not just Europe, but of course globally. So again, a little bit it's difficult to put, I think, for us a commercial value into this. I think we have to here to recognize that we get good funding from actually both public as well as our private investors to do the clinical programs, well supported by the EMA opportunities. But as Angela Lukin also said, and it was interesting to hear that scaling up production for your tablet was in the area of $1 billion US, and of course Pfizer have the capacity to do so. But a biotech company will not have that opportunity, and that's where what we are looking for now are different opportunities to find ways to finance scale up of production, so that once we have a positive readout, we will also be able to deliver, which I think we have a obligation to do.
Thank you so much. I'm sad to say that we have run out of time for this panel now. So I just want to say a huge thank you to Emma Cook, to Angela Lukin, to Dr. Kim Köhler, and to you, Christian Brousseau, for joining me here in the studio, and to our audience who have delivered questions to us as well. A reminder, use the hashtag EPP for Health and continue to drop your questions and your comments on the live feed. We'll be back in just a couple of moments. So, welcome back. Remember that you can join our discussion via the YouTube chat by posting Facebook comments or by using the hashtag EPP for Health on Twitter. We will get to as many of the questions as we possibly can. So that was a really interesting panel that we just had, I think, where, I mean, these are three very busy people, so we like to thank four busy people for joining us and giving us an hour of their time. We heard from pharma companies, we've heard from politicians and from the EU regulator. But there's another crucial aspect to all of this, and that's us, citizens, patients, and also medical professionals. And we're delighted to now have our next panel and to be joined by representatives of both of those medical professionals and patients. And we're going to be discussing ways to increase diagnosis efficiency. I'm joined by Dr. Christian Kaiser, the Vice President of the Standing Committee of European Doctors. Also, Professor Maurizio Cecconi, who is the president of the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine and the head of anesthesia and the intensive care department at the Humanitas Research Hospital in Milan in Italy. And we have Marco Greco, who is the president of the European Patients Forum. So as before, we were going to give each of you a short introduction. So we'll start with you, Dr. Christian Kaiser. Thank you so much for being with us here on our EPP event, looking at COVID therapeutics and long COVID.
Thank you very much for the invitation. We are happy to join this discussion today as a CPME. For myself, I'm an anesthesiologist and I'm an active anesthesiologist working in a hospital, academic hospital in the Netherlands. I'm a training director of anesthesiology, so I see a lot of COVID-related planning issues in my hospital. So that's for my background. But just to explain what CPME is about, we're an umbrella organization of national medical associations. So we're trying to represent all doctors in Europe in general. We have 37 national medical associations across EU, UK, but also EFTA, but also some observer countries in the West Balkan. In this crisis, a main advantage for us in this crisis is that we actually have very much increased our cooperation between all those medical national associations. So we gathered a lot of information on how we're working on this COVID pandemic clinically, but also for the general practitioners, everything that the authorities in the European countries did. And we learned from that much more and quicker than we did ever before. So that in this new wave of COVID infections, we see quite a new set of problems. We have also, and that was discussed in the previous discussion, also treating patients with long COVID, but also tackling this backlog of unmet medical need. Treatments that were postponed, surgery that were postponed, all due to this COVID crisis. And that's quite a bit of concern, and hopefully not combining that with a new influenza season this year. Also, what we see in all the countries is doctors having to deal with mental and physical toll of this pandemic. We see a lot of illness, exhausting work hours, unsafe conditions, and also we try also to address that. Last month we received from the European Parliament special recognition on behalf of all doctors for all the doctors' effort in this COVID-19 pandemic. So that's a little bit background. On this diagnostic issue, what we see now within the CPME is that the main problem of COVID is hospital capacity. And if I look, for example, in my own hospital, a large group of people that are on ICU are unvaccinated. So we need actually these therapeutics for COVID treatment. Not to mention also we need at the end therapeutics for long COVID. Main thing now is that for the Netherlands, for example, we are on 85% vaccination rate, but then still there's 15% of people that can become ill are just too many for our hospital system. So we need these therapeutics. So we're very happy to discuss about that in this panel discussion. So thank you very much again for this invitation and looking forward for the discussion.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christian Kaiser. Now we're going to hear from Maurizio Cecconi. You've been on intensive care units, you've been, coordinating them throughout the pandemic. How positive are you that we are getting the right drugs and have the right sort of clinical capacity now?
So hello everyone, and thank you for the opportunity for being here. I am indeed the president of the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine, so I represent intensive care professionals mainly across Europe, and we are very pleased to see developments in this field. However, it's very important to realize that what we've learned during this pandemic is that probably we shouldn't put all our eggs into one basket, and we need to have a 360-degree strategy to tackle the pandemic and also to be ready for future threats. In intensive care, for instance, what we do normally is treating severe infections. We were doing this even before COVID-19. So you may have heard, or you will hear more in the future about sepsis. Sepsis is when there is a response of the body to an infection which is overwhelming, and that's basically what happens with COVID-19. So COVID-19 is part of the family of sepsis. With the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine and other societies around the world, we have, for instance, something called the Surviving Sepsis Campaign. This is an infrastructure to bring evidence-based medicine for the early diagnosis of severe infections, for the early treatment of severe infections. And indeed, we use this also during COVID times, at the beginning of the pandemic, and again recently, to see what we can do to recognize patients with symptoms early, so that we can give them access to early treatments so that their prognosis is better. And in this sense, it's very important that we don't forget this. We don't forget this when hopefully the pandemic will be finished. I was very touched by some of the testimonies of long COVID or patients that had COVID before. They were telling the story, for instance, about long COVID. For us that we work in intensive care, patients that have a severe infection like COVID and then have symptoms, we refer to those patients as patients with a post-ICU syndrome. So what we see with COVID is actually not surprising to us. The reason why now everyone sees this is because we've never been hit in recent years by such a large number of infected people at the same time. There are some specific features about long COVID, but there are some features that are common to patients that are admitted to the intensive care unit with infections. Now, I am very, very happy to see that we, thanks to research of the previous 20 years probably, we are seeing an acceleration now in developing some therapeutics that can help with COVID-19. However, we have to remember that we don't have specific therapies that can guarantee a cure 100% of the time. And even having access to intensive care does not mean that we will be able, unfortunately, to save all these patients. With my research group, we've seen that after 6 months of leaving the intensive care alive, for instance, a large majority of patients were finding it difficult to return to work, again, thanks to long COVID, to cognitive impairments, to physical impairments. This is a massive burden for families and for the patients, and of course then for society themselves. So we should really put every effort to prevent patients requiring active care, and so we should prevent, first of all, them becoming infected. I'm also part of the WHO Clinical Guidance Committee. Yesterday we published an update where we were recommending, for instance, against plasma. It's great that we see new development in this sense, but really what we should remind people is, again, that vaccination and global vaccination is really our best strategy to reduce the risk of infections for ourselves, to reduce the risk of infecting others, and ultimately to try to bring the pandemic under control. So in this sense, I would like to conclude also to say that as intensive care units, we are clearly the last line of defense, and we are here and we've been ready to try to help as much as possible during the pandemic. But it would be a mistake to focus all our efforts in the future just in treating COVID patients or increasing the number of ICU beds. To increase these ICU beds, which is something that we have to do for the future, we need to put the resources now, but especially the resources have to put in place not just for devices and drugs, but for healthcare professionals. In order to increase ICU beds, we don't need just ventilators and drugs. I often say that a ventilator is not an ICU bed. An ICU bed is a team of competent people working together. I was very proud during this early phase of the pandemic to work with the European Union. In particular, the European Commission funded a training program to give basic skills to professionals not working regularly in intensive care so they could help during surgeries. And this helped dramatically across Europe. We trained more than 17,000 people with this training program called C19 Space. Now, however, is the time to get ready for the next pandemic, for the next phases. We really need to invest for the next 5-10 years to focus on more special training in intensive care, to attract people to specialties like intensive care that are really demanding. We need to make them more attractive so that we have more people ready for the future. And in this sense, we should not forget really to focus on also how we can help and learn from each other in Europe, and to improve, for instance, the recognition of intensive care medicine as a specialty, which is not there yet, and to facilitate the free movement of intensivists across Europe.
We'll talk a little bit more about capacity building shortly, but firstly, let's turn to Marco Greco, who is from the European Patients Forum. I wonder if you can explain a little bit about how we are adapting the treatment of patients right now and how we need to change the sort of current clinical processes.
Thank you for this invitation and for this opportunity to be here today and to take the patient perspective. The European Patient Forum is for sure aligned with the goals and the objectives set by the EU strategy on COVID-19 therapeutics, as well as with the European Medicine Agency rolling review of COVID-19 vaccines, treatments and medicines. The cooperation we have had along the last months with the Commission and the European Medicine Agency, I believe, has been essential for us, but also for all the stakeholders, for better tuning the strategies. Hence, we are welcoming the placement in the market of these new therapeutic instruments that are on the way to be approved. However, for the patient community, it is essential, it is very important to prevent inequalities in access to these therapeutics, and this is somehow an essential focus, because as Stella Kyriakides has mentioned before, vaccines were delivered equally. The same should happen here for therapeutics and treatments that are under development or that will be approved in the next weeks or months. So access to COVID-19 therapeutics depends on what we call the 5 A's: availability, affordability, adequacy, appropriateness, and accessibility. If we're missing one of these 5 things, then we are not in the condition of saying that each patient is receiving the right therapies at the right moment and at the right cost. So connected to these, for sure, there is the necessity of preventing shortages on COVID-19 therapeutics and to tackle them if they occur. In that perspective, for sure, we welcome the new extended mandate of the EMA, which this mandate will now give the agency powers to monitor medicine shortages across the EU countries. But this also means that EMA will need more resources and the time to adapt to this new challenge. In addition, APF believes that patients should be involved in this endeavor. It is critical to understand patients' experiences on therapeutic shortages and their impact. Patients should also be able to report directly shortages to national and EU competent authorities. Also, authorities should work on preventing patients from suffering from financial hardship as a result of seeking COVID-19 treatments. That means out-of-pocket cost to patient that has to be avoided, because it is essential to get rid of this pandemic. These may be because maybe of policies where a medicine or a diagnostic is not reimbursed, or is reimbursed to an inadequate extent. Finally, but I would say firstly, we need to keep on working hard in communication to patients, because that is a key important element. We need to be sure that these therapeutics will not become an excuse for not getting vaccinated, or that these new therapeutics will take away the importance, as Professor Cecconi has just mentioned, on vaccinated. Vaccination and prevention are and should be the first line of defense against the COVID-19 virus and all the variants. We need to keep pushing on the importance of vaccination, even before working on other things. Patients' organizations are key position to transmit these messages. We have worked hard and we have cooperated as much as we could in the past. We're ready to do our part also in this phase. Also, it is essential to guarantee the safety of these new treatments and these new instruments. And I think I have covered almost everything I had in mind for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marco Greco. So a reminder to our audience that you can put your questions in the chat to any of our panelists. If there's something that has been raised or something that is raised that piques your interest and you'd like a question to any of the panelists, drop it in the chat on YouTube, on Facebook, and we will try and put those questions to our panel. But turning back to you, Dr. Kaiser, how important is early detection in the treatment of COVID-19? And why is it taking us so long, actually, still? Why does it continue to take us so long to sort of test and know that we have COVID and for it to develop?
Yeah, that's actually, I think there are three things. It's time, capacity, and behavior. First of all, we all say the gold standard is the PCR test, and the PCR test takes a couple of hours to get a result from it. But then also, important thing is capacity. If I look to my own country for the last few weeks, we had we needed 100,000 tests a day, and we then got to the limit of our testing capacity, and then we saw that actually people who want to be tested only could come after 36 or 48 hours to be tested, and then still to put this all in the equipment and have a result, you can get your result only after 24 to 48 hours. So there's a capacity problem. The other thing is behavior. That we saw in behavior research we did also here in the Netherlands and other European countries, that a lot of people with this pandemic going on, this is the season to also have a mild cold, and with this mild cold you actually have to be tested to see if you have COVID or not, and you actually can infect other people. And what we saw from our research here is that almost 50% of the people said, nah, I'm not going to do that. And if they're still going to work, still going to the shops, etc., they will infect other people. So early testing is a very, very important thing to manage this crisis, because if you don't do that, the only thing you can do is limit the freedom of movement of people. That's only then effective to prevent COVID spread of in the infections. So what we introduced last few weeks here in the Netherlands, that even with mild colds, we are now suggesting people do this antigen self-testing. It has its disadvantage. It's not the gold standard, but then still, if you are infected, you have a high possibility that you can also find it with this self-test. If you have that at home, it's easier. In my hospital now, we ask all employees like myself who are doing patients' work to test yourself twice a week with this self-testing, just to prevent the possibility that you're having no complaints whatsoever. What would be very possible now, having also have the booster vaccination, and then spread it to other people, let alone patients. So yes, it is important, and we try to manage that, but we need, for this PCR testing, you need actually more capacity. And what I know of is only Denmark had enough capacity to test everybody very, very quickly in the first waves. So that's a problem.
Thank you so much. Turning to you, Professor Ciccone. A lot of the sanitary passes that we're using in the European Union in different countries are basically either, mainly vaccinated or tested. Are they the same thing in sort of the safety of trying to end the pandemic?
Thank you so much for this very important question. A test is just telling you if you are infected in that moment, but it's not protecting you against an infection. So we should really make sure that we pass a clear message about this, that it's not either or, and we should really find ways to promote vaccination as much as possible. It's only through vaccination and also through campaigns of vaccination that will allow for enough time for boosters that we will be able to get the pandemic under control. Also, of course, with other public health measures. Probably tests will have a role even on top of vaccination to make sure that we decrease the risk on some specific events like gatherings and so on. But it's very important that we tell individuals that when you vaccinate, you're protecting yourself, you're protecting others, you're also protecting the healthcare system. If we are not overwhelmed in hospitals with patients that come with COVID, we can take care better of all the other diseases that unfortunately had to be stopped or halted for some time when we have surges of COVID cases coming through.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. There's been quite a lot of reporting about how many cancer diagnoses have been missed, etc., due to the pandemic. Turning back to you, Marco Greco, we have at the beginning of this pandemic there was so much fear around this disease, and now we sort of live with it, right? And we're all very aware that everybody knows somebody who's had COVID, and it's touched every aspect of pretty much everyone's lives. What are the expectations of patients now, and how are they changing from perhaps at the start of the pandemic?
Thanks for this question. I think I would split the answer in two parts. The first part is about the expectation of the chronically ill patients, that is the majority of the community that I do represent. And I think there is a clear expectation, a clear need of coming back to normality, of having again the possibility of accessing the healthcare system with certain timings, with certain services, coming back to what it was normality, hopefully also learning from what, because the pandemic has taken with it also, the answer to the pandemic has taken also some innovations when it comes to, for example, informatics and so on. But you have just mentioned these before putting the question to me on the table. It's important to come back to have the possibility of early diagnosis, of prevention on other fields, and to have a decrease of the pressure on the healthcare systems, and particularly, of course, on the intensive care unit, but also on the overall system, because it's an entire hospital, it's an entire system that it is under pressure if the situation is overwhelming. The second line of expectations, let's say, it's about what will happen now with these new therapeutics, for example. Of course, these should put some optimism around, because it's something we really need. But as it was said also by the previous speakers, these should not mean to lever down our attention. It's important to keep on preventing this infection. It's important to keep on using in the proper way vaccination and testing. It's important to use properly and efficiently all the instruments that science is making available in this moment. So far, the expectation for the patient should become to see a very reduced risk of these, because it's true, we have learned to live with the fear of COVID-19, but this is not normality. Normality is to get rid of it, and we need to put all our efforts for getting rid of this.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, there is so much that we can do, and we have so many processes now, as we heard from the companies, the therapeutic medicines are, racing forward. So we have a question from someone in the audience who's written their question in the chat, in the comments, which you can also do on YouTube or Facebook. And if you're using Twitter, you can use our hashtag EPP4Health, and we will try and put as many of your questions as we can to our panelists. One has come in from Robert, and it's directed towards you, Dr. Kaiser. The question is it too early to predict if the therapeutics that we're going to have are also going to lose some of their effect with the Omicron variant? I mean, this variant is really causing a lot of concern as well. Do we know if the therapeutics are going to work, or is it too early to say?
I think that also in the previous session that it was a little bit mentioned. if you look now at the therapeutics that are developed, you expect that if you're trying to prevent virus from spreading in the body, then that mechanism should be the same. So that you would expect that Omicron would not have an effect on that. On the other hand, on the vaccines is different, total different discussions, and that we still do not know. But also for therapeutics, we do not know it. On the other hand, for the therapeutics, we also need more evidence. We now see trials, but we also see now for remdesivir, that's been the therapeutic that has been registered also already in 2020. We now see the reports that it's not as effective as we thought it would be, and we're focusing now on other drugs. So for a general doctor's point of view, we're happy that there are far more therapeutics developed, and maybe Dr. Ciccone can focus a bit more on therapeutics now also used because they're already on the market but not registered for COVID, but still already used on the ICUs. What is happening there?
Yeah, I was actually going to put that question to you, Professor Ciccone. Perhaps you can explain what has changed. What are you doing with ICU COVID patients right now? What is the sort of current method of treatment?
So thank you for the question. First of all, we need to remind everyone what intensive care is. Intensive care is where we basically support patients with life-saving treatments like ventilation or drugs that are keeping the blood pressure, for instance. Many of these treatments that you can do just in an intensive care. The main purpose of the treatment that we do is actually to buy time, to allow time to the body to recover. So a lot of the work is actually done by the patient himself or herself. What has changed, however, in the last 2 years, and we have to say that this was done thanks to some research consortium, some research preparation that was put in place exactly to respond to a pandemic some years ago. I'm naming REMAP-CAP or the recovery trials in the UK. We've learned that some drugs that we were using even before could be used to modulate the response of our body to COVID. A first example, a very cheap and available drug, dexamethasone. Dexamethasone has become the standard of care for patients on oxygen now. Other drugs that have come through over the last year, remdesivir were mentioned before, but probably the one that has shown more potential together with dexamethasone, which is a steroid, are immunomodulators like the IL-6 so-called inhibitors. Many of the drugs that were used, and Ima Cook before, she was referring to miracle drugs, unfortunately they didn't show any evidence on treatment. So hydroxychloroquine and other drugs like ivermectin, for instance, that have been on the news a lot, they just caused a lot of disinformation, but they didn't really bring any benefits to these patients. So in summary, what we have the ability to recognize early patients with severe symptoms, because if we can start our treatments, the ventilation if it is indicated, other treatments if it is indicated, we are giving a higher chance to this patient to recover. And at the same time, we can use these drugs that modulate the response of the body to the infection, so that we give a higher chance of survival to these patients.
Thank you so much. Yeah, all the sort of hype around hydroxychloroquine, got it this time, I mean, it came from President Trump, then President Trump, didn't it? And there was a lot of discussion about it, but it hasn't really been used clinically that much. Turning to you, Marco Greco, we touched on this a little bit earlier, the reality that there is a lot of other diseases that have not been picked up due to COVID-19. I wonder how much of a worry that is for you at the European Patients Forum.
It is thank you. It is a true priority because we don't want this situation to become more and more detrimental for the treatment of chronically ill patients that have to face already very difficult situations. We have seen how important the impact was, for example, on rare diseases that are a field per se. So we need to learn also from the fact that this pandemic has shown, and we're not really happy about that we were right as patients' organization in underlining certain weak points of the healthcare systems all over Europe. This pandemic has shown that all we were claiming for was important, and we hope now that this message will not fall again. It's not only to look beyond the pandemic preparedness, but also to build the capacity of our healthcare systems in order to provide truly universal health coverage. We have also learned that despite what we may think, healthcare is something global. Healthcare is for sure a very European subject, and we need to work and to strengthen our cooperation there, because this is an important message, not only talking about solidarity, but also about efficiency of our healthcare system, efficiency of the learning curve when we need to face emergencies, but also better tuning the systems for the ordinary work. We have developed as patients a specific, vision statement, that for the future of our health systems, and we will keep on asking for investments in these. An essential part of these investments, this has been already mentioned by Professor Cecconi, should be on investing on healthcare professionals, on their formative course, and on their education. But also we need to keep on investing on communication and patients' education, not only patients' empowerment, but the majority of the troubles we have had in communication are coming from the fact that there is still too much difficulty in certain part of the population in understanding science, and this is something we need to face and we need to tackle as soon as possible, also through the scholar system. Thank you.
So turning back to you, Dr. Kaiser, what Marco was just speaking about there was, information sharing among healthcare professionals across the European Union. Has there been much of that? Do you communicate with other clinicians in other parts of Europe? Have you found that sort of information about best practices and way to improve the way that patients are treated has been spread?
Yeah, we're trying to do that regularly. So we receive the updates of our national members, and we communicate that through our website, and that's a public site, so that's available to everybody. We try to give press releases about the different topics, so that people are more informed. We are participating in the European Medicines Agency Healthcare Professional Working Party, but also on other topics, antimicrobial resistance and vaccine strategies, etc. Just to for the vaccine strategy for all kind of vaccines, we have now a complete campaign to inform patients more on these topics from a scientific point of view. Still, what I also see in my own country, in other European countries, there is a group that is not interested in this kind of information. So the only thing we can do, for example, we have also in the Netherlands a group of patients who don't want to be vaccinated because now all kind of reasons. So we're now trying as doctors to go into communities where we know that the vaccination rate is low, to go door by door to explain, to ask and just try to explain what are the benefits of vaccination and why it is safe, etc. So we are doing our best, and we're not the only organization. Other organizations also doing that, and also from the national authorities are doing that. So there's put a lot of effort in, because if we're going to very high rate of vaccination, then it would be a lot easier. That's for sure.
So, Professor Cecconi, I wonder if we can ask you, obviously getting vaccinated is the first thing that we can do as citizens to fight COVID-19. But after that, what other things can we do to see early diagnosis and to speed up diagnosis, and also to speed up the recovery from COVID? What can we do?
So, look, thank you for this question, because it's very important. As I was saying before, intensive care units are the last line of defense, but the attack towards the pandemic really is citizens. Citizens have given us a tremendous help, for instance, with the uptake on vaccination. In Europe, even if we started a little bit slow at the end of last year, I'm very proud to see what citizens and former patients have done really to try to uptake the vaccination rate as much as possible. But what we've learned with this virus, unfortunately, is that it's so transmissible that even 70 or 80% is not enough to create what was called before the herd immunity. It's not enough. We need to vaccinate as much as possible. We should try to give the opportunity to be protected and to protect others, to all the population. On top of that, helping us also with public health measures. We shouldn't really invest all the strategy just in one single aspect. Face masks, respecting physical distance. These little things that all of us can do as citizens are giving a little help, which is a great help when we put all these little helps of everyone together. So respecting the rules that are put in place there. And again, I have to say, the majority of European citizens have done that, but we know that there is a minority that is unfortunately sustaining the pandemic now, and we need to try to help to convince them or to try to find ways to bring them on board so that they can help us as well. On top of this, when unfortunately someone gets infected with COVID or with any other infections, before we were mentioning multi-drug resistance. This is something that is already happening now. It will happen again in the future. We need to be prepared to recognize infections. What I think we've not done well as an intensive care community yet, and I think citizens could help us there, and maybe even Marco Greco with his associations, it would be really to raise the awareness of what a severe infection is. We've done fantastic work on recognizing what a heart attack is. We've done fantastic work in recognizing what a stroke is. We've not been so good in raising the awareness of what sepsis is, which is basically a severe infection. So if you think that you have a severe infection, if you think that your loved one has a severe infection, in that moment, accessing a hospital or accessing healthcare for an emergency treatment is very, very important. Unfortunately, we've seen stories of patients being sick at home for 2 or 3 days and then arriving at the hospital when it's too late to make a real difference on those patients. So raising that awareness on top of all the help that I was saying before, it's something that I think will be very important to help us in intensive care to give the best chances to survival to everyone. When we do that, and when we do well in the intensive care, then we also maximize the chances of recovering after COVID. I didn't mention that before, but for instance, one of the major challenges for me as a treating physician during the first wave was the fact that families and loved ones were not allowed to be there at the bedside. There is a big bulk of research done in previous years that shows that having family at the bedside helps with the recovery, minimizes the cognitive impact, the mental impact of illnesses. We need to realize that this is not just an extra, it is part of healthcare. That's why we want families and patients back with us at the bedside, and really to try to help to prevent long COVID, to prevent post-intensive care syndrome, and then to help these patients with follow-up in the community could get the best access to physiotherapy, to rehabilitation, so that really we can bring them back for their quality of life, also for the quality of life for the families, but also for the society. We are losing a lot of people as a workforce at the moment, and that's something a society cannot afford and should not really be happy of.
It's very interesting, isn't it? The idea, like you say, it was heartbreaking to start with that people wouldn't be able to see their families. But it's interesting that you say actually that it is important for recovery. I'll turn back to you, Marco Greco. We've seen with the vaccines, for whatever reasons, there is hesitancy towards them. We're now entering a phase of therapeutics. It's certainly what we're talking about and focusing on today. Can you envisage a world in which people are worried about these things? And how, I suppose the question is, what kind of information do patients need around therapeutics?
Well, this is going to be interesting to be seen, because basically what we have seen is the hesitancy towards vaccination, not towards that specific vaccine very often, but towards vaccination as a principle. A lot of people that doesn't want to get vaccinated are claiming that they don't want to be vaccinated for several reasons, for religious reasons, or because they say there are therapies or there should be therapies, whatever this is true or not, that are efficient, and so we don't want to get vaccinated. We simply want to be treated. So, from a logical perspective, this should the introduction of these instruments should solve the problem. So we will see, because as the majority of the Novaks are asking for treatment, the fact that treatment will be available, should prevent part of this population to say, no, I don't want the treatment. Also, because at that point, we will have another big problem, because if you don't want to get vaccinated, if you don't want to get treated, then I don't know what else we can think to do, apart from self-solving the problem. So this is an issue. The point is that, in my opinion, we're talking about therapeutic instruments that are important. We're talking about a drug class that is, let's say, strong. People, chronically ill patients already knows very well, for example, what is a biological therapy and the side effects of a biological therapies. That is why it is essential to keep pushing the message that this will not substitute the importance of vaccination, because relying only on these therapeutics, with the problem that these therapeutics can have naturally, as every drug, it's a logical nonsense that we are trying to communicate to our members. Investing in communicating with patients, with the community, is for us a priority. But I have to say, it is much easier for us to communicate with patients because they have already a sort of background, rather than with people that is not a patient, that is not a family issue, and then we try to convince them from nothing to get vaccinated. We all had to learn to gain experience on this over the last 12 months. If I have another 20 seconds, I would like to add a point. APF was very well placed when this happened, because 2 years ago, without expecting what would have happened, we started two working flows. One was about vaccine hesitancy, and so we were ready, or we had done a lot of preparatory work on that, on how to communicate about vaccination, and we have put these at the disposal of the European Commission when it was necessary. Another streamline was about antimicrobial resistance, and so I take here the chance to accept the invitation from Professor Cecconi on working on this, because it's something we're really worried about. And we have, of course, slowed down this part, but this is another side effect of the COVID. No, we still know that this is a priority, and we want to restart this, and we are for sure seeking for partners on this.
Thank you so much. Just turning back to you, Dr. Kaiser, I think what are the main clinical supports that would help you in treating patients?
That's
of the therapeutics.
Of the therapeutics, what would be most helpful if a patient had some complaints, like a mild cold, it could be easily tested and then started very early on therapeutics, and then preventing hospital admission. So actually preventing severe disease. And we're trying to do that with vaccination. On therapeutics, you need it in the early phase. On the other hand, we also need therapeutics in these severe cases, so that patients can recover better. But the main advantage is early testing, early therapeutics, and then preventing hospital admission.
Thank you very much indeed. So we're going to wrap this panel up now. I really want to extend a huge thanks to Dr. Christian Kaiser, to Professor Maurizio Cecconi, and to Marco Greco for your time today. I know you're all frontline busy people as well, so we really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come and speak to us. So thank you. So now we're going to turn to Peter Liese, who is an MEP and the EPP coordinator for the Environment, Public Health and Food Safety Committee here in the European Parliament. And he's going to give us some concluding thoughts and sort of wrap up everything that we've heard today. I think we've had two very interesting panel discussions, and we heard from the Commissioner and the MEPs at the beginning as well. So thank you so much, Peter, for being with us. What do you make of what we've heard?
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me the floor, and a big thank you for all our panelists and participants, and to those people in the background that helped to organize this event. I think it was impressive and we learned a lot. For me personally, I hope the other speakers will forgive me, the testimony of Mauricio was very impressive, as well as from Marco, from the patients. Mauricio, I always admire how calm you are. And, you know, after all, what happened? You were in the first wave in the heart of the storm in Milan, and you followed all the frustration that we have, that again and again people are not careful enough and the health system is overloaded. And I want to underline both Marco's and Mauricio's clear message that therapeutics shouldn't prevent us from being vaccinated. And something that I would like to underline, I think it was not clear enough in the panel, these therapeutics have side effects. And the side effects are much more serious than those of the vaccine. The vaccine have very, very rare side effects. The therapeutics have a bit more frequent side effects. That doesn't mean we don't need them, but it is clear that prevention, also in this case, is better than cure. And if we have the title of this event, Game Changer for Europe's Recovery, I would still say the vaccination is a game changer. It is successful, but we need the booster. It's very clear that it is not enough to get 2 times from the usual vaccine, and especially Johnson & Johnson isn't protecting enough with 1 doses. Now we have the challenge with Omicron, but the good thing is that Europe is prepared. We had already changed the European legislation in spring, so that the adaptation can be very fast done by the EMA if an adaptation of the vaccine is necessary. We don't need to go for the whole process of approval. It must be just a bridging study to prove that the immune response of the adapted vaccine is as high as the original immune response. All the other studies don't have to be repeated, and EMA can do it quite quickly. But that shouldn't prevent us from getting the booster now, because in 3 months, when the adapted vaccine may be available, you may have already been infected. So this is one point. But of course, we need these therapeutics. We need them for those that have not been vaccinated, a very small part of the population that cannot be vaccinated, and unfortunately quite big part that rejects, opposes the vaccine, even though they could be. It's even more important, I think, for the vaccine breakthroughs. And I was quite puzzled when I heard that the studies is mainly on unvaccinated. So my pledge to the companies is do the tests also with vaccinated people, because we have these breakthrough infections. And those people need to be protected and need to be treated. And then of course we have the long COVID cases, where we have a lot of people that have been infected when the vaccine was just not available. So they definitely have a point, and they deserve support. So I think Europe is on a good way here. And it's another clear sign that we are stronger together. Europe has supported the development of the vaccine. Without support of the European Union, we would probably not have the mRNA vaccine, because it's not only BioNTech that got support in this process, but also the technology, the basic technology has been supported by the European Union. And also for the therapies, European research, Maria Gabriel is helping a lot. This is another example why the health union is so important. We are stronger together. And our chair, Manfred Weber, said in the group meeting this morning that we need to continue to work on the health union. Tomorrow will be another important day when it comes to the health union and the EPP priorities. EPP has fighted to make the fight against cancer a priority. 1 in 2 Europeans will suffer from cancer in its life, so it's very important to address this. Scientists tell us that cross-border cooperation, cross-border research, also cross-border treatment is important. And we were successful to motivate the European Commission to have an action plan on cancer. We were successful to create a special committee on cancer, the BECA committee. The final report of this committee will be adopted tomorrow. And I'm very happy as the chief negotiator of the EPP, the shadow rapporteur, that our priorities to make life more easy for those that fight cancer across borders, to make life more easy for the patients, that we succeeded with these priorities. So I invite you all to continue to follow the EPP on health issues. We are the political group, the political party that fights for the health union in the interest of patients. And I think this is desperately needed when we wish something very good for the new year, which is coming soon, or for the birthday. We always say, we wish you all the best. And the most important is health. So this should also be reflected in European politics and politics at all levels. So let me conclude with wishing you all a Merry Christmas, despite some civil servants in the European Union wanted to avoid us from saying this. We as an EPP, we are for Merry Christmas, even though we value also our compatriots that believe in something else, but Merry Christmas is Merry Christmas. And all the best for the new year. And the most important is health. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed to Peter Liese there for his concluding remarks. And so with that, we're going to wrap up this EPP group event on COVID therapeutics. The group would like to remind you that you should keep following them on EPP for Health, the hashtag, and to continue the online conversation with us after the event wraps up. Also, head to the webpage as well. You can take a look at all the people that we've had to speak and follow them. And to remind you that the EPP group would like you to follow their accounts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. A huge thanks to the team, the technical team and the back-end staff that have put this event together. A huge thanks to all of our speakers. I think we've had a real range of interesting and different discussions looking at COVID-19 therapeutics and on long COVID and the issues surrounding that. This pandemic is not over. The vaccines are available and would encourage everybody to go and get their booster or get their first vaccine if they haven't done so. From us here in the European Parliament, thank you so much for watching and goodbye for now. Stay safe.